0430 hours, June 27, 2026. 22 nautical miles off the coast of Ras Al Khaimah, an Iranian one-way attack drone strikes the bridge of the Panama-flagged supertanker MT Kiku. The vessel carries 2 million barrels of crude oil, and it happens exactly 10 days after the United States and Iran sign a 14-point ceasefire agreement in Islamabad. That is the anomaly. A truce on paper, a drone strike at sea. The gap between those two facts drives every decision that follows a 48-hour exchange of heavy military fire, from a frantic bilateral halt order to an emergency summit in Doha, Qatar, now scheduled for June 30, 2026. The Islamabad Memorandum of Understanding, signed on June 17, 2026, carries 14 distinct points designed to pause a conflict that began on February 28, 2026. 4 months of strikes, maritime disruptions, and energy market shocks produced the document. Brent crude oil trades between $120 and $126 per barrel at the height of the Strait of Hormuz blockade. That number alone tells the story of the pressure both governments absorb before agreeing to sit down in Islamabad. But a ceasefire negotiated under Pakistani mediation and signed remotely does not automatically translate into quiet waters in the Strait of Hormuz. That gap between diplomatic architecture and operational reality is precisely what CENTCOM and the IRGC now confront in real time. 4 days after the Islamabad MOU, on June 21st, U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance and Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi meet at the Bergenstock Resort in Switzerland. They discuss a direct military-to-military deconfliction channel between CENTCOM and the IRGC. The idea is straightforward. A dedicated line between commanders reduces the chance that a tactical incident at sea triggers a full exchange before diplomats can intervene. Both sides agree in principle to the concept. That agreement, it turns out, means very different things to each party. On June 25, 2026, something else surfaces first. An unidentified projectile strikes the Singapore-registered container ship Ever Lovely, 7.5 nautical miles southeast of Dahit, Oman. The bridge area absorbs the impact, but the vessel remains operational. No party claims responsibility. CENTCOM logs the incident, and in an interview published on that same date, which he gave on June 22 aboard Air Force Two, Vice President Vance tells journalists about the arrangement, casually characterizing it as an opportunity to hang out in Doha. That disclosure detonates a different kind of warhead inside Tehran. If you want to stay updated on this unfolding conflict and global security developments, please subscribe and turn on notifications. Within 24 hours, IRGC spokesman Hossein Mohebi posts a statement on X and calls Vance's claim an absolute lie. While his statement does not clarify whether an IRGC representative is traveling to Doha, he insists no hotline exists. No agreement covers a direct military channel. Mohebi's statement lands on June 26th, and the Bergenstock framework is pushed to the brink of collapse as technical talks are canceled, though mediators scramble to keep diplomatic channels open. The gap between what Vance describes and what Mohebi denies is not a translation error. Both governments now hold contradictory positions on the primary de-escalation mechanism the entire ceasefire depends on, which is the precise context inside which the MT Kiku drone strike occurs. At 0430 hours on June 27th, the Iranian attack drone reaches the supertanker's bridge. 2 million barrels of crude oil sit in the hull below the point of impact. The bridge sustains damage. The ship does not sink. But the strike, read against the backdrop of Mohebi's hotline denials and the absent deconfliction channel, carries a signal that CENTCOM cannot leave unanswered. By the night of June 27th, CENTCOM launches airstrikes against 10 Iranian military assets. The target set covers coastal radar sites, air defense batteries, and drone storage facilities across 3 locations: Sirik, Bandar Ilenga, and Keshem Island. This is not a random list. coastal radar sites lose their early warning function. Air defense batteries lose the ability to contest airspace over the strait. Drone storage facilities lose the magazine depth that produces strikes like the one that reached the MT Kiku at dawn. The targeting logic runs in sequence, each strike designed to degrade a specific layer of Iran's maritime strike capacity. Degrading Iran's capacity, though, is not the same as ending Iran's will to act. Between 0200 and 0300 hours local time on June 28th, the IRGC Aerospace Force responds. Ballistic missiles and armed drones depart Iranian territory and travel toward 2 U.S. military installations simultaneously. Ali al-Salem Air Base in Kuwait absorbs the first wave. The U.S. Fifth Fleet headquarters at Port Salman in Bahrain takes the second. Though the IRGC claimed to have struck 8 U.S. military infrastructure facilities across both countries, CENTCOM reported no casualties or major damage. The scale of the response signals something specific. The IRGC is not operating outside its command structure. These are calibrated strikes, delivered within 18 hours of CENTCOM's June 27th target set, against facilities chosen for their operational value rather than their symbolic weight. Both governments now face the same arithmetic. A 14-point agreement signed 11 days earlier sits on record. A functioning deconfliction channel does not exist. CENTCOM hits 10 targets. The IRGC strikes 8 facilities across 2 countries. And somewhere inside that exchange, a threshold appears. Because on June 28th, both the United States and Iran agree to halt all kinetic strikes. The mechanism matters here. Neither government frames this as capitulation. The halt arrives alongside a shared decision: schedule an emergency technical summit in Doha, Qatar on June 30th, 2026. The venue itself carries information. The earlier Swiss meeting centered on Iran's nuclear program, a wide frame with decades of contested history attached. Doha narrows the agenda to shipping security, de-escalating the recent military flare-up, and resolving the immediate maritime standoff surrounding the Strait of Hormuz, and how 2 adversaries communicate in real time to prevent the next maritime incident from becoming a missile exchange. On June 29th, U.S. President Donald Trump confirms the Doha meeting on Truth Social, noting that Iran made the request. That detail aligns with the IRGC's own June 28th calculus. The strikes on Ali al-Salem and Port Salman cost Iran in 2 currencies at once: diplomatic standing and physical infrastructure. The CENTCOM target set already removed radar sites and drone facilities, absorbing another round of precision strikes while the IRGC bypasses or rejects the newly proposed deconfliction channel carries a different set of risks than it did before June 27th. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi stands beside his Iraqi counterpart in Baghdad on June 28th and states, on record, that Iran holds exclusive authority over the Strait of Hormuz. The warning follows directly: outside intervention delays operations. That declaration lands in public record, and it answers a question the Islamabad MOU leaves open. Article 5 of the 14-point agreement contains language both governments read differently. That single contested clause sits at the center of what remains unresolved, as scheduled technical talks in Doha on June 30th have been dismissed by Iranian officials. The Strait of Hormuz question is also a global energy market question, and those 2 dimensions cannot be separated. At the height of the blockade, maritime traffic through the strait drops 94%. The world's largest sovereign wealth funds, cargo insurers, and energy importers from Tokyo to Rotterdam absorb those disruptions in real time. The Doha summit carries pressure from every country whose energy security depends on crude oil moving through a 21 nautical mile wide channel at the mouth of the Persian Gulf. Qatar, as host, sits at the intersection of both pressures. It holds $6 billion in frozen Iranian assets that Tehran expects to receive under the preliminary agreement's terms, which gives Doha both the leverage and the urgency to produce a workable framework before the day ends. 3 facts about the June 30th meeting define its operating constraints precisely. The deconfliction hotline that Vance described on June 25th does not yet exist, confirmed by reporting from June 27. The contested language in Article 5 of the Islamabad MOU remains unresolved between the 2 delegations, and Iran holds a public declaration by its own foreign minister claiming exclusive strait authority, a declaration that contradicts the shared governance framework the MOU implies. Each of those variables carries enough weight to collapse the June 28th Halt order independently. Together, they define the exact scope of what negotiators must work through in Doha. The engineering reality of the MT Kiku strike explains part of what makes the deconfliction problem so time-sensitive. A one-way attack drone carries no return option and no abort signal. Once it departs the launch site, the command chain that authorized it cannot recall it. This means that even if a hotline existed at 04:15 hours on June 27th and both commanders agreed to stand down, the drone was already 15 minutes from impact. A deconfliction channel manages escalation at the decision layer, before launch authorization, not at the terminal phase. The Doha summit must produce protocols that operate at that earlier point in the sequence. That distinction separates a functional ceasefire from a document. The ever-lovely incident on June 25th adds a separate data point to the same problem. An unidentified projectile strikes a commercial vessel before the MT Kiku attack, before CENTCOM's retaliatory strikes, and before the IRGC ballistic missile response. No party claims that strike. That ambiguity carries its own tactical lesson. When attribution is unclear and no deconfliction channel exists, every maritime incident becomes a potential trigger with no circuit breaker. The Strait of Hormuz is not merely a narrow passage in the geographic sense. It is a corridor where misidentification and miscommunication carry direct consequences for global oil flows and for military postures on both sides of the exchange. What the emergency talks scheduled for June 30th must produce is not a final peace agreement. The Islamabad MOU already occupies that role, however imperfectly. What the summit must deliver is a functioning technical protocol, a communication layer between CENTCOM and the IRGC that operates fast enough to prevent the next unidentified projectile, drone launch, or radar lock from consuming the ceasefire before either government reaches a phone. The Bergenstock meeting established the concept on June 21st. 9 days later, Tehran and Washington need Doha to establish the actual architecture. The events between June 17th and June 29th trace a specific pattern. A 14-point ceasefire produces a diplomatic contact in Switzerland. Vice President Vance produces a disputed announcement about a deconfliction channel. That disputed announcement produces a public denial from Tehran. The denial produces a maritime strike against a commercial vessel. The strike produces a CENTCOM response against 10 military sites. That response produces an IRGC ballistic missile strike against 8 U.S. facilities across 2 countries. And the exchange produces a mutual halt and an upcoming summit scheduled in Doha. Each step follows from the previous one, with a logic that makes the June 30th meeting not an optional diplomatic gesture, but a structural requirement of the ceasefire's survival. The pattern also answers the open question this sequence raises. Why does a 14-point Memorandum of Understanding fail to prevent a ballistic missile exchange 11 days after its signing? Because a memorandum governs intent, not capacity. The Iranian Army, Artesh Air Force, retains the operational reach to strike Kuwait and Bahrain simultaneously, even after absorbing a 10-site CENTCOM strike package. That capacity does not disappear between now and Tuesday. What Doha must build, in a single day of technical talks, is a mechanism that makes exercising that capacity less rational than maintaining the halt, not by removing Iranian capability, but by creating a communication structure that gives both sides an off-ramp before the launch order travels down the chain. What June 30, 2026 tells both governments is exactly how much infrastructure a paper agreement actually requires to hold.